Hello, in this video we're going to make a salsa bowl using the Salsa Bowl die. This die will require some kind of a support depending on how moist your clay is when you extrude it. You're going to need to have this is a little foam block, pink foam, you can buy it at Home Depot. Build your block so that it can support the inner wall. It doesn't have to be exact, but something that you can set it on and let it rest while it dries just slightly so that you can work it. It is a fairly large extrusion, so when you put the die in, try to make sure that you're not clipping the corners if you're using a 4-inch round extruder. It just barely will fit in the 4-inch round extruder. And I'm going to go ahead and get that put in and put some clay in. Now the clay I've got, let me focus the camera here. The clay I'm using is fairly wet. Actually takes a fingerprint pretty good. I've already wedged it and shaped it to fit into the extruder. I'll work on this block a little bit more and prep that. I want to cover the block in paper, but I really want the block to match the radius of the die itself. So what I'm going to do is use this little piece of foam and grab something just to draw that radius and prep the block. The foam is really easy to cut. You can use coarse sandpaper, which is how I did this edge, and I'm just going to use that same coarse sandpaper to shape it down to that size. So I've decided to add a little piece of foam. I've shaped my block down where it's fairly similar to that shape, but the sides here will droop a little bit if the extrusion is really wet, and I really would like that to be supported. So I think what I'm going to do is move this over just slightly and add a piece of foam to cover that area and reshape it. I'll be back when that's done. Okay, I've got the block formed to somewhat fit the shape of the salsa bowl. I'm just using blue tape to hold the two pieces of foam together. All the glue that I have that dries fast at all eats foam. Before I wrap it with paper, I'm also going to add just a little piece of wooden block to raise it up off the surface so it's a little easier for me to work the edges and put it on the rotary table and handle the piece without touching it. I attached the foam to the wooden block just with some blue tape, keeping it simple. Go ahead and install the die. I'm going to put the smooth side of the die facing up, make it a little easier to clean later on. This other side has a textured pattern to it, and sometimes it holds a little bit of clay. It really doesn't matter if it's facing out or in. It's really your preference. I'm going to put the feet toward the wall. Make sure, mount the die up where it's tightened flat. There's not a gap on one side or the other. That'll help with squeeze out. And then you want to check and make sure that you're aligned. This is a large die, so want to try to center it in the barrel. Once you get centered, tighten it up and load your clay. Now, this clay is pretty moist. We'll see how it works out. It might have to be just a bit drier than this. Should be fairly easy. I'm going to hold underneath here and kind of support this initial piece. Try to keep it from hitting the eye bolts as it comes down. And there's my extrusion. I'm going to use a cut wire just to cut that off. Make sure you're in focus. It is. There's some dry clay inside from my extruder not being cleaned out. And I'm going to try to support it from the bottom without distorting it too much. Now, if I lay it down like this, it's a pretty soft wall right now, and it'll definitely distort. So the first leading section of it here, I guess it helps if you can see what I was talking about. This is just dry clay that I had in my extruder that I should have got out of there before I extruded this, but I didn't. I'm going to use this wire to cut through. I really would prefer to have that on a piece of foam. So I'll lift the extrusion up, put it on a piece of foam. You can see that that's definitely laying down here. And I want to cut it to the length that I'm going to work with. Pretty soft clay. Cut through it there. I'm going to make a salsa bowl about this long. So I'm going to cut through on the back side. And now I'm going to flip this piece over and let it support on this just like so. So I've removed the die from the extruder and I'm going to use it. I've thrown out a slab. It's roughly 1/4 inch thick. Just throwing it out. There's lots of different ways to do that slab. I'm going to use this for a guide to cut a pattern for my end slab. So I'm going to cut on the outside line of the die all the way around, stopping at the top. And then all I need to do is connect this top line, and that will give me one end. And we'll do 2 of those. And then they're going to have to sit and dry. This is the same clay that I used for the extrusion, and it's really too wet for hand building. And there's 2 ends. I'm working on an extrusion here for a salsa bowl, and it can be distorted a little bit. My clay's a bit dry for this, but if you keep this moist enough, you can shape this outer wall. And I'm attempting to make just a sort of a U-shaped bowl here. We'll see how all that works out. I'm going to work this edge just a little bit. Definitely my clay was really just a little bit too dry to be able to shape it too much, but it looks like I might be able to salvage it. Moisten that up a little bit, and I want to stretch that edge just slightly. Something about like that. And get these ends cut off. See what I've got. Got it up on a piece of foam so I can push down past the extrusion to cut the end off. This clay's dry enough that the wall is holding on its own fairly well, which is a little too dry for what I was trying to do, but make up a couple of ends and close this bowl up, and have a salsa trough. Okay, I've got some ends that are about leather hard, easy to handle at this point. This piece is leather hard. We've got an extremely windy day outside, so everything's drying too quick, but we will score and slip and install an end on the end of this. It is cut out to match that shape, so it should be fairly simple. I'm going to score. The tools all fell in the water. Okay, here's the finished salsa bowls. The ends are applied. I just had a little writing here on the side that embellishes it. You can do really whatever you want, add some kind of a little sprig mold or anything to it. This one, it'd be a great piece to put in the center of a table. Everybody could get to the salsa bowl without someone being in the way. So have fun with it. Thanks. Bye-bye. Please subscribe if you're not already, and give us a like. Thanks. Bye-bye.